Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Fast Forward Expert Roundtable this month. Today is June 28th, and we are revisiting a topic that we did back in May because the response after the event was very positive. We had a lot of people reach out to us and go, hey, I missed this. How do I get a hold of this information? So we wanted to circle back around on this topic so people would have an opportunity to participate and take away this information that we're going to talk to about today, because it is a challenge that we all face. And we will definitely be focusing more on that discussion point here momentarily. Now, I know that there are some of you on this call who are joining us for the very first time, so I wanted to make some quick introductions of those of us who are speaking today. First, my name is Craig Hart. I am part of our events team here at Vertical Alliance Group. If you have ever participated in one of our live events in the last couple of years or one of our webinars, you've seen me, you've heard my voice. I've actually been with Vertical. I'm working on my 4th year, and my background is in remote learning, in distance learning. I've been doing that on and off with different industries since 2004. And my co-host today and presenter is Mr. Jay Wommack. And Jay is the founder and president and CEO of Vertical Alliance Group. And he started this enterprise way back in 1999, and it has grown and evolved over time. He evolved into e-learning and really jumped into it feet first back in 2010 with the advent of CSA and the new requirements there to help truckers understand the new rules and requirements that were being asked of them, and now works with over 500,000 individuals every year doing remote learning for them, and has over the life of the company delivered 112 million training sessions through our platform. So Jay, good morning, sir. Welcome to the webinar.
Good morning, Craig. I appreciate that. I appreciate the introduction. The first thing I'd be asking if I was sitting in the audience right now is what qualifies these people to talk about recruiting? Well, we started this company with a recruiting website in the transportation industry. And at one point we had 350,000, matter of fact, when we sold that website, we had 350,000 truck drivers a month coming to that website. And we put on basic, really, 2-day retreats on how do you use web-based recruiting to go recruit truck drivers. And so we cut our teeth in that side of the industry. It was really fun to do that. My background is I really love sales. I started selling when I was in the 5th grade, and I just fell in love with it. There, some people in life look for what makes them happy their entire life. And I found mine in the 5th grade, and I've been doing that ever since. And I really enjoy that. And I enjoy the aspects of that. This weekend, Craig, I was at a business conference with 300 different companies, and they were not trucking. There were maybe 2 or 3 trucking companies there. It was from all industries. And the biggest concern, the single biggest concern that was talked about was the Great Resignation. And I know that you may have heard that on the financial news, but the Great Resignation, we had more people resign from their jobs in March of 2022 this year than any other time in the history. And everybody is concerned about how are we going to, not just truck drivers, how are we going to recruit good talent? How are we going to replace the baby boomers that are retiring? And what are we going to do to try to attract Generation Z and the millennials and Generation X, to come in and replace those jobs? So this webinar is about how do you recruit? How do you recruit good employees? And then how do you retain the good employees once you get them recruited? And we're going to pitch something a little bit different today. Most people don't, particularly HR departments, don't like doing the kind of rejective work that we're going to talk about today. But let's go to the next slide real quick, Craig.
Actually, one thing I would like to share with the folks that are on the call today, this is something that we do want you to participate in, ask questions of as we're going through this. The easiest way for Jay and I to see those questions is through your chat functionality. So go ahead and click on the chat button that's at the top there on your main menu. It's going to open up a smaller window, and at the bottom of that, there's a little button that says hosts and panelists. If you click on that, it will give you the option to change it to everyone. And that way, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, everyone on the call can see it. Guys, we often have the same questions. So if someone asks that for you, that saves you the time, effort, and energy. And we want to be able to respond to the things that you have questions about with what we share. So go ahead, open that chat window up. And if you'd like, let us know who you are and where you're joining us from today.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Okay, we polled our clients. One of the things I love to do is find out what's really happening in the industry, and we polled our clients and we asked them, what are your top 3 issues? And this polling is about 6 weeks old right now, but number one was recruiting and retention of not just drivers, but all employees. Now, thrown into number 1 was driver pay. That was a top concern as well, because the industry is ramping up and paying a little bit more and a little bit more. And then they're worried about if we have a recession, how many of y'all watch Game of Thrones? Winter is coming. We keep hearing there's going to be a recession. If that's the case, and you've already raised driver pay, what do you do? So that's number 1. Number 2 was fuel prices, obviously. And that if we poll today, the fuel prices may jump to number 1. I'd kind of like to see y'all's comments in the chat box on that. If you think that would, take over number 1 is the issue today. And then obviously rising insurance rates, that's always been a concern. And matter of fact, we had a conversation with a top underwriting company, and I'm not going to say who it is because they probably would not want us to disclose their name, but they said in the last 3 years, 100% of renewals went up. The price of the insurance went up in the last 3 years for 100% of their renewals. And this is a major underwriter. So this isn't like 200 or 300 companies. This is thousands of companies. So anyway, those are the top 3. Number 1, recruiting and retention. Number 2, fuel prices. Number 3, rising insurance. And we're here today to talk about recruiting and retention. So Mr. Hart, this graph, I want y'all to, if you don't remember anything else from this day, this is the graph that you need to take a picture of, and you need to remember this graph because this is reality. This is what we're facing. This is not speculation. That graph is real. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I've been preaching this graph for the last 30 years in my career. So what that blue line represents is the number of people leaving the workforce versus the ones coming into the workforce. So you can imagine a rising or lowering water level. That's what that graph indicates. And what it's showing us is that this labor shortage that we're all concerned with is not going away for the next 2.5 to 3 years. This is not created by Biden. It's not created by Trump. It's not created by Bush or Obama or whoever. This is demographics. This is straight out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It is straight out of demographics by the federal government. How many 63-year-olds that are leaving the workforce, and how many of them are being replaced by 20-year-olds that are coming into the workforce? Now, that is a scary graph. But if you know this ahead of time, you can now start working on your solution. And that's what we're here. That's what we're all about. This topic of conversation this weekend with these 300 different companies, this was the topic of conversation. It was talking about how are we going to go out and find and recruit and retain good employees, particularly with this demographic occurring. There's one other variable that needs to be thrown in here, and I'm not sure if we cover much of this, if we'll have time to today, but it's the culture of your company, because Generation Z, the 20-year-olds that are replacing the baby boom generation that's retiring, they think completely different than I think. I'm 60, I was about to say 64. I'm 65 now. So I'm baby boom. And this is what we're here to talk about. So let's Craig, unless you have some additions on this.
I love this graph. My background prior to coming to work for Vertical Alliance Group was in the insurance and financial services world. And this 2010 drop was a significant item that was, and Jay, I know that you also have some background in financial services as well. This is where the baby boomers started to retire in large numbers. And so that's why you see this precipitous drop off here in 2010. This is nobody's policy. This is people who are qualifying for retirement, their Social Security, and they're leaving the workforce to enjoy their later years. So that's really the cause of that. And it's continuing to decline over time. So that's where we are. That's where we are. So we are almost to the point where we are having negative labor growth, which is not good.
That's not good. And matter of fact, if you start thinking about the Bureau of Labor Statistics talked about 40% of your employees, not just truck drivers, 40% of your employees will change jobs today if they get the right offer. Now that's good news and bad news, because If that means 40% of your employees, that means 40% of somebody else's. And that means if you have the right process in place, then you can turn around and start picking up some other employees and maybe start picking up some pretty good employees at this time. But let's jump into what I love the most. If you're going to do any type of recruiting, you have to have 5 things. You have to have a list. This is common sense. What do you have to have? You have to have a list. You have to have a list of truck drivers. You have to have a list of employees. You have to have a list. If we're looking for salespeople or client service reps, we have to go figure out how to generate a list, a never ending supply on that list, and make it a quality list so you don't spend so much money. Number 2, you have to have a presentation. And the presentation has got to talk about your company. What values do you bring to the table, and what's in it for the driver? What is in it for the employee you're trying to reach? Because I want y'all to remember this. This is the other, if you don't remember anything else. I've already had one, is that graph. Now here's the second. If you don't remember anything else, I want you to picture everyone you're talking to stamped on their forehead, what's in it for me? Because when you're trying to recruit, when you're trying to sell, anything like that, they want to know what's in it for them. So focus on them. What can you do for them? What are the values bring the presentation? Number 3, you have to deliver your presentation. And number 4, the most important part of the entire process is the proper follow-up. And this is where most companies fall short. This is where most salespeople, by the way, recruiting is sales. There's a reason we have that name, because you're selling someone on the idea of joining your firm, joining your company, joining your industry to go to work for you. So that's all you're selling. The HR people that are recruiting, they're selling, particularly in this environment. So it is a buyer's market right now. It's not a seller's market. And we're the ones selling. So number 5, you have to ask for the order. Come work with us. We'd love to have you join our team. So what are the next logical steps? Those types of things. So these are the 5 must. And what we like to do is we like to look at the world a little bit different. When everybody's starting to zig, we want to zag. And, with all this talk about winter is coming and the Great Recession, the Great Resignation, I'm one of those that says, okay, now's the time to double down your efforts so that you have the right people coming in the door at the right time. So next slide, please, sir.
Just so everyone knows, we are recording this presentation today. We will be sending the replay out to everybody who is attending today, along with a copy of the slideshow. So don't worry about that.
So list development, we went through the 5 basic things. Obviously, you have to have a list, presentation, deliver it, follow up, and then go for the close. So list development, how many leads do you have? Do you keep your numbers? Are your numbers accurate? How many leads are you generating? And where are you getting those leads from? Are you doing it from referrals? I can tell you that we have had issues with our client service department and turnover in client service and trying to find good people. We have been now full in our client service department for the last 6 months, and we have not had to have as many people coming through that department because we follow our own process. How many leads do you have? How many good names do you have? What are the sources of those names? Let me tell you a trick. A trick is to sit down and do a brainstorm. I sat in a room one day with about 12 different business owners, and we talked about lead source. And someone was at the whiteboard and they said, okay, let's talk about your lead sources. And those 12 in that room came up with 31 different lead sources. 31. I'm sitting there looking at that list on the board, referrals, knocking on windows at truck stops, knocking on, that was an interesting one. Knocking on doors at truck stops. We had that one at the partner roundtable. Someone was talking about doing that and they said they get good results doing it. Advertising. So you start, there's a number of ways to do it. Just going to visit truck stops, different ways to go do this, but they wrote down 31 different methods. And I started looking at them. Our company was only using 4 of 31. So one of the things I would say to you, one good tips is to sit down with 5 or 6 people. And it doesn't even matter if they're in sales or not, or if they're in recruiting or not. Just sit down with 5 or 6 people on the whiteboard and say, okay, we need some top drivers. How should we go out about getting? What are the lead sources we can look at? And you're going to have the standard lead sources that come up. You're going to have, go to the truck shows, go to, place social media ads, but somebody's going to come up with something unique. Listen to your people, take advantage of the folks that you have right there. The other thing you got to do is look at what is your cost per lead. When we first started our recruiting website, the advertising cost per lead in the year 2000 was $1,140 per lead. I remember that number specifically. $1,140 cost per lead. That was in 2000. And that was because people were using the magazines and they were having to go to the truck stops and they'd have billboards and all those different types of things. So what is your cost per lead? If you don't know your cost per lead, you must figure out your metrics. I mean, we have a saying around here and it's called stat madness. Keep up with your stats, know what your statistics are. Now, if I said, how many leads do you have? And you tell me, well, Jay, we have 100 leads a month coming in. Then let's brainstorm and figure out how do we get 20% more leads? I promise you, when you start to brainstorm, you bring the people in and you sit down and you put the whiteboard together. If you will just ask around the room, how can we improve our lead flow of potential truck drivers to hire? You're going to get some great answers out of your own room. Believe me, we've done the workshop. I've been in the workshop, and 20% is a no-brainer to get that. Promise you, try that, and it'll change your world, at least change the number of leads that you have. Next one, please. List management. Now, before we get into the presentation, if you have all these leads, you have to manage the list. This is incredible. A couple of weeks ago, we had a partner roundtable where we invited our clients in, and we always bring in no more than 15 people that are clients. And we do this every month, and at our expense, we do it. And we basically bring them in and say, tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Tell us what you need. And we started talking about recruiting. And a very sophisticated recruiter that knows exactly what she's doing and having a great time doing it and looking for a very specific niche in tankers said that she kept all of her names on her yellow pad. She keeps them all on the yellow pad. No electronic conversion, no electronic method of maintaining your deal. We use Salesforce, we use Pardot. But I want to give you all a brief history of where that came from, how it developed. Do you remember the old 3x5 cards and I think your mother or your wife may have a recipe box that we grew up with. Mm-hmm. And this is where these electronic systems came from, contact management systems. They came from the 3x5 card box. And if you open up the recipe box, you have, January through December, and you have 1 through 31 in there. And you would have someone's name on it. And as you made a call or you reached out to them, you would write down the name. I'm going to try to recruit Craig Hart. So I'm going to write Craig Hart's name down on the little card, 3x5 card. And I'm going to put down his number and all the different information I can on it. And I'm going to reach out and I'm going to call Craig. And when he says, oh, yes, I'm very interested in whatever, then I'm going to follow up with him. I'm going to make a note on that 3x5 card, I'm going to make a note to send him the information he requested. And then I'm going to follow up in 1 week. So I'd go through my little box and I would find, 1 week, let's say today is what's the day? The day's the 28th. So I'd look and say, okay, on July the 5th, I'm going to reach out to Craig and make sure he got the information I sent him. And so I'd put his little card on July the 5th. And then when I got to July the 5th, I would go through all of my stack of cards that I would follow up. That's how contact management systems were developed. I'd kind of like to know what are y'all using out there? I hear 10 Street a lot. I hear Salesforce some from the larger companies out there. So be sure and put in the chat what y'all are doing. And then y'all take a look at the chat to see what your peers are doing, because you have to have this. It makes life a lot easier to keep up with it. We have close to 20 people representing our company selling and knocking on doors. And if we didn't have a contact management system, if we didn't know how to maintain the database I think right now, Craig, we have 78,000 names in our database.
Something like
and
that.
So if we don't maintain that, then we're lost. So
absolutely. We're not here necessarily to be advocates for a particular system, but we are advocates for technology making your life easier and being able to streamline the processes that you want to do in terms of being able to keep track of information, keep track of the follow-ups you want to do, date and time stamping everything that you do so that you don't have to go back and remember, oh, when was the last time I talked to Joe Smith when he was expressed interest in coming on board? So we are huge fans of technology as a technology company to make your life easier.
Absolutely. Good. That's a good point. We are not here promoting any one individual, contact management system like, Driver Reach or anyone else like that. So anyway, next slide, please, sir. The presentation. I love this slide, and this is one where I'm probably going to get some people upset. But let me just be real here. What are you selling? A job? Because 750,000 DOT numbers out there are saying, come work for us. 750,000 DOT numbers are saying, come work for us. So you've got to be pitching something different. Yeah. So that's why I've got, so what? Remember, what's in it for me? What's in it for, when you're talking to a potential employee, what's in it for me is on running, scrolling across the top of their head. Always remember that. But here's what you have to do. And this is where we're a little bit unique in how we go about things. We want to educate the marketplace. That's why we're doing these types of webinars. We want to educate. And we believe that if you educate people and you bring them down the right funnel, then all of a sudden they'll want to do business with you. If you educate potential truck drivers or truck drivers that you want to recruit, or any employee, dispatchers, anyone, you have to educate them. The way you start a core story has several different parts. Number one is it's all about your company, and it's all about what people are feeling and facing in the world. So let me give you an example. And this one's really, I've tried this out, and I get all the trucking company executives that I've talked to about this one, they all kind of take a deep breath and step back. If I start my presentation with more pay, more home time, more miles, who doesn't start their presentation like that? That does not make you stand out. So I have yet to have a company that will try this particular pitch, but do y'all realize that the life expectancy of a truck driver is 16 years shorter than the life expectancy of the average American? Let that sink in. Now, if I'm talking to, and so part of the core story is a stadium pitch. If I'm talking to, imagine a stadium out here, and I've got 100,000 truck drivers sitting in that stadium, and I want them all to turn and look at me, not look at my competitor, not look at a number of the other 750,000 companies, but if I want them to look at me and pay attention to what I'm trying to get them to do, go to work for me, what is my stadium pitch? What am I going to say that makes 90,000 of those 100,000 truck drivers turn and look at me? So that's the first part of your core story. You have to have a stadium pitch. Then you have to talk about one of their points of pain so they understand exactly that you know what you're talking about. So let me give you an example. If you want to try to recruit somebody, you need to go status to status. It is much, much easier if you have a sales-minded truck driver. It is much easier to go put a truck driver in a recruiting spot, and that person should do much, much better. Statistically, they'll do much better than someone who has never driven a truck, because they understand the life of a truck driver. They understand what they're going through. If you're trying to get a dispatcher to recruit, if you're trying to recruit dispatchers, get the HR person to sit down with dispatchers for a day or two or three or even a week, or promote somebody from the dispatcher pool into HR. Let them recruit that type of person. You can't do that with every position. I mean, in technology, we can't have a recruiter from technology sit down and try to recruit. That's a specialized job. But in the transportation industry, it is a no-brainer to go get a truck driver that understands that. And so the next thing, you've given them in the stadium pitch, the big picture of why you want to capture their attention. The next thing is you got to let them know that you understand them. So that's got to be part of your core story. Then the next thing you would want to go to is the buyer's guide. Now, let me explain a buyer's guide. This is common sense. If your mother came to you and said, gosh, I want to drive a truck, you're going to say, okay, here are the 5 things you need to watch out for before you join a company. Or here are the 3 things, or here are the 7 things that you need to watch out for before you join a company. With a recession coming, with the great winter ahead, are they stable? Or what kind of freight are they hauling? I mean, think back when COVID hit. If we look at our industry during COVID, 20% of the companies, 20% were struggling to keep their doors open and were on the verge of bankruptcy because they were hauling cars, they were hauling the wrong thing. 20% were booming. They were hauling food. The rest were kind of in the middle. Their operating ratios were sitting at 0 or 1 or -1 or +2 or -2. but 20% of the industry was in trouble. So what are the 5 criteria? What is we call it the buyer's guide. What are the 5 things? I like to use 5. What are the 5 things that you would tell your mother, brother, father, sister, daughter, son, aunt, or uncle that they need to consider before they join a company? And by the way, that buyer's guide that you're telling them about leads them right down towards your company. Make sure that they do have, I would just say it, hit the objections head on. Everybody talks about home time. Everybody talks about more miles. Everybody talks about more pay. Address things like that head on and say, we want to verify that. You want to make sure what they're telling you is actually true, that you can get more miles, you can get more pay. Number 2, if they don't have a 401k, I'm just making these up on the fly. If
Sure.
they don't have a 401k, you need to make sure they have a 401k. So put together your 5 criteria that are going to separate you from the pack. And then when you actually want to come to retention, I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but if you want to go back to retention, you constantly remind them of the 5 reasons they joined your firm in the first place. Those are the types of things that we never do. When you're recruiting, when you're trying to sell something, sales never stops. Buyer's remorse starts immediately. So the core story then has a call to action.
Actually, can I go back for a second, Jay, on that core story, on those questions? I think it would be a great exercise. I mean, we all have had that friend that has asked us, hey, I want to go work for this company. And, if you're familiar with the industry, you go, well, hey, here's the 5 things you need to ask them to make sure it's going to be a good fit for you, make sure that they're buttoned up. What may happen as you're going through this and trying to find out what these would be for your organization, some of them might not be difference makers. Some of them might be pretty standard, like, oh, we operate new trucks. Okay, well, that's not necessarily something that's going to give you a greater distance above a competing trucking company you might be working against. So you might want to experiment with different questions for your organization to figure out if there are some that really set you apart from other organizations that would be a positive for someone to know about your group. So one of the things we're going to come back to consistently throughout what we're talking about is testing the results of what you do. See how these things are working. If they're not the right ones, see how it goes. Run a couple different sets of questions, run different messages, try different things in your presentations. So always review the results of what you do. Same thing with the sources of your leads. Are you using multiple sources? Are you getting better quality leads from one source versus another? Are you even tracking that right now? So yeah, I love testing things out over and over and over again to see what works and what doesn't. And if it doesn't work, change it. You're not married to it. You don't have to live with it. It exists for the purpose of that ad or that conversation, and you can try something new.
So the first thing you need to do in your core story is figure out who's your perfect driver. That's your avatar. That's the term they use in marketing, is the avatar. And if I were you, I'd take a look at your current driver base and I would do a Venn diagram. Y'all seen those 3 circles and where do they all intersect? That's a Venn diagram. And I would look at it, which drivers you have are profitable, which ones are fun, and which ones are easy to work with. And when you figure that out, that's your perfect avatar of who you want to recruit to go to work for your company. So that's a nice little tip too. If you don't remember anything else today, just remember the avatar. Next slide, please, sir. Okay. Delivering the presentation. How many times have you seen people just do it off the cuff? Oh, you've got to practice the presentation. I love the story about Sir Anthony Hopkins, the actor. Remember Silence of the Lambs, Anthony Hopkins? He will cold read a script 200 times before he actually starts to put personality into the script. How many of y'all have practiced or had your recruiting departments practice what they're saying, practice what they're doing? You got to practice, practice. I have made over 100,000 cold calls in my career. And if I get a new script, I practice the script. I am not too good to do that. Nobody is. There's a reason that you practice. There's a reason you go through it over and over and over again. So how do you deliver your presentation? Is it through the phone? Is it through a Zoom meeting? Is it a slideshow? Keep your numbers. How many demos do you complete? How many people do you hire versus the completed demos? What was the lead source? It's what Craig was talking about a second ago. What was the lead source? How many did you deliver? How did you deliver it? How many meaningful conversations? Do you need to target the spouse sitting at home that's keeping up with all the benefits and the paychecks and all those things? Or do you need to target the actual driver themselves or the potential driver themselves? Keep records of those things. Know who those are. We know that around here, we close 50%. It's going to fall 50. It's going to go from 47 to 52% of every completed demo. We will close that business. Now, that's a real stat from our company, and it fluctuates from month to month. But if I go look at the last 20 years and I'll look at our stats, and we have them, I can tell you what we've done and what we haven't done. So keep those stats that will help you create efficiencies that you need down the road.
I would also say with your presentations, you may be running more than one. Different people are motivated by different things. We're big fans of the group Women in Trucking, and they've got some great research that, hey, when you're trying to attract women drivers, they are incentivized by different things than men drivers are, and that's fine. But you need to have messaging that speaks to women drivers very strongly, just as you do with men drivers. They're not going to show up for the same thing. So with these presentations, you might need to have more than one appealing to a different audience. So that's something to think about. If you are targeting younger drivers, Gen Z drivers, they are motivated differently than Gen X and millennials. They are looking for different things. So take some time to think about who is the audience, who am I presenting this to, so that you can tailor those to that audience and speak their language. And again, practicing lets you know what's strong about your presentation. And guys, I do a lot of presentations for our company. I practice all of them, even though I've been doing this for years, and years, because I want to make sure that when we're done with a presentation, that no one, that I'm forgetting to cover something that's important. So I want to make sure I'm hitting all those important points that matter to me as an organization, but that should also matter to that specific driver candidate that I'm looking for, my avatar. So practice is great. Having multiple things to practice, also great.
Okay, so one of the things that if you don't remember anything else, remember this. You've had 2 or 3 of those already. Today, if you text people, 94% of texts are looked at within 4 minutes. That's an interesting stat. So one of the things we do when we bring people in for our 2-day workshop on recruiting is we teach them how to do a video text, how to create just with your iPhone a simple video text. And that's one great way to deliver, because people look at it. Your prospects look at it. If you don't remember anything else today, remember that. Okay, next slide, please, sir.
And I will back that up, Jay, with 65% of adults between the ages of 18 and 56 prefer text to email. So if that's not something you're taking advantage of, you should be.
That is a great stat. I did not know that one. I know I'm 65 and I much prefer the people I met this weekend. I told them, send me, if you want me, get a text. If you want me, send me a text. Otherwise,
I know that just from working with you.
So the follow-up is where most companies fail, most salespeople fail, most recruiters fail. They don't follow up properly. And this really is where the rubber meets the road. If you've done everything else right, you've pitched, you've gotten the right avatar, you got the right leads, you're making the right pitch, you found the people that you want, and you're delivering the presentation, then you follow up. And if you want a good long-term employee, a long-term employee is going to stay with you and going to make a spur of the moment decision. They're going to take their time and they're going to think it through. And you want them to. This is one of the problems we have in the industry is that, the top 50% stay with us and the bottom 50 are like a revolving door. So what we want to do is we want to hone in on that bottom 50 and figure out, okay, how do we have that top 50 creep into the bottom 50? So all of a sudden now we have 90% of our drivers that are wanting to stay with us always. So follow-up, there has to be value added. When you think about follow-up as a relay race, you have to have value added when you follow up. We used to have a salesperson that would pick up the phone and call people and say, hey, Craig, how you doing? And we had to let them go. They would have no follow-up skills whatsoever. Anytime I make a follow-up, and we have a process that we call our drip system, and some of y'all may be the recipients of it. We send out 12 to 14 letters a year, and there's a formula behind that. Now, I want you to think about the cost involved in this. 14 letters a year cost $1 a letter, maybe $1.10. So I'm going to spend 14 potential dollars this year on a prospect or on a driver, on an employee. We do this here. Our HR department follows our own process. Now, 4 of them are going to be what's happening in the world around us. And in this particular case, what's happening in the trucking industry and what's happening among truck drivers. 4 of them are going to be holiday letters. So that's why the contact management system is critical. If I find out, people love to celebrate certain holidays, I want to know that. And 4 are going to be very specific as to why you should join our firm, or a testimonial from one of our current drivers that's really been with us a long time and loves the company. So, those are the types of things that you have to follow up on and make sure that you're doing that properly. We use a drip system with a contact management software. And our drip system is just that. It's a drip. And then we follow up with phone calls every so often. So in your industry, in your company, depending on what you're trying to recruit, you want to come up with the right timelines and the right follow-up nurture campaign to do all of that with. So this is critical. Keep KPIs. Let's jump to the next slide, Craig, please, sir.
I would also say, just to highlight a point you mentioned, these are physical letters that we're sending out to people. And if this is not something that you're looking at, I would recommend it. I know personally, in a week, I get probably less than 10 pieces of mail in my home mailbox. So when something shows up that's out of the ordinary, that's hand addressed, it looks like someone took the time to put a stamp on it, it's got my name on it, I'm going to be more inclined to open that up, because I just don't get that many pieces of mail like that anymore. I don't get that many pieces of mail at all. So think about that. And it's going to be a way to touch and get in front of people that other groups, other potential recruiters that you're competing with are not going to do. They're going to live on a phone. They're going to live electronically. They're not necessarily going to take the time to write a physical letter and send that out the door to someone.
Perfect. Okay. How do you ask? How do you ask them to go to work for you? So there's a great book. I read this book years ago when I started my sales career. And it's an old book, and everybody says, yeah, that's old school, that's old, whatever. But it was written by a guy named Percy Whiting. And it's when I took the Dale Carnegie sales course. And it's called The 5 Great Rules of Selling. And I believe so strongly in that book, I probably have 25 of them in my library so I can give them to new employees that come to work here, either recruiting or selling for us. And there are 5 great rules of selling. And one of them is attention. The first is you got to get their attention, interest, conviction, desire, and close. And in order to go ask for the close, you have to put that desire into place. And so let's say you've done everything right up to this point. Now paint a word picture. I like to paint word pictures. I'm a real visual type person. And we go into the more detail of this in some of our workshops, but if you're visual, paint visuals. If you know you're talking to someone who's visual, then you say, hey, I want you to picture this. I want you to picture that you're at the end of your career and you've got the bass boat in the vacation house in the 401k, and you're on easy street because you made the decision today to go to work for our company and get involved in the 401k and get involved in everything here. And you're retiring with over $1 million. That's a pretty picture. Well, that's not going to happen unless we get started. So what's the next step? So when I told that story, everybody started to have their own visual. They pictured the bass boat. They pictured the lake house. They pictured the $1 million in their 401k. So paint the word picture, and let it be a natural flow on that. I remember Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, was a Democrat Speaker of the House out of Massachusetts years ago when Ronald Reagan was the president. And he ran into his 3rd grade school teacher. And he was a great, big, huge Irish guy. And his school teacher was 4'7", tiny little woman. She was about 90 years old when he ran into her. She was past her 80s, close to 90. And he said, well, I certainly appreciate your voting for me. And she looked at him and she says, I didn't vote for you, Tip. And he said, you didn't? Why not? Because you never asked me to. Don't ever let it be said that we don't ask you for your business. We don't ask you to work. People want to know that you appreciate them and want them. So ask them politely, ask them the right way, but ask. Most salespeople do not ask. I cannot believe it, but they don't. They don't ask. So how do you ask? Do you ask, how do you ask? Good question. And then once again, bring 5 or 6 of your coworkers in and say, if you're going to go try to sell somebody, and by the way, we all sell, Craig was just talking about Mike Rowe having a webinar or a podcast talking about everybody sells. some way or another. If you're married, you had to sell the young lady, or if you have children, you got to sell them on all sorts of concepts. So ask people, how do you ask for the order? How do you ask to close? How do you ask people to go to work here? And just ask and write down, brainstorm with people. That is critical. Craig? Know your numbers. In order to, this one slide. Okay, if you don't remember anything else, just remember the slide. This slide is absolutely critical. You've got to know your numbers, because you cannot optimize and maximize your numbers if you don't. If you have 100 leads, how many meaningful conversations do you have? Do you have 50%? How many of those turn into good interviews? And how many of those turn into hires? So in this case, we have 100 leads, and so 50% turn into meaningful conversations, 50 of those turn into good interviews, and 40% of those turn into new hires. Brainstorm each one of these numbers. How do we increase our leads by 20%? How do we get more people to have meaningful conversations? It may be as simple as giving them a $10 Starbucks card or a $25 gas card today. And have, you might be able to up that from 100 leads to 200, and 60% meaningful conversations would be 120 leads or meaningful conversations. If you just stay with 50% of those, that means now you have 60 interviews. And if you got a 50% closing rate, you now have 30 new hires. You can't do that if you don't know your numbers. We look at numbers every single day around here. Do that in your department. And if you're not doing that, please do that. Please take advantage of that. Follow the processes.
Jay, how would you define, for the folks that are on the call with us today, what a meaningful conversation is? How do you define a meaningful conversation?
That is a good question. A meaningful we debate that one around here all the time too, because a meaningful conversation is not somebody answered the phone and said no thank you. That's not a meaningful conversation. A meaningful conversation is you actually have a conversation. Hey, Craig, this is Jay. I saw that you were interested in going to work for our company. I'd certainly like to talk to you about that. And you say, I'm very interested in this. Now's not a good time. Can you call me back later? Okay, that is not a meaningful conversation. A meaningful conversation is you actually talked about the subject at hand. Even if it only lasts a minute and a half, you talk about the subject at hand. And it's critical to keep that, because sometimes you can have a whole lot of meaningful conversations and none of them convert into interviews. So what do? You go back and say, gee, I got to change the way I'm pitching our company to these people when they call me. Because if I don't know that number, I don't know what to change. That's a good question.
Excellent.
Okay, testing the message is one of my, Craig alluded to this one earlier. A/B test. In marketing, you hear this all the time, A/B test. I just got through referencing test the message. I got through referencing keep your numbers. And if your message is not resonating, if you're not getting enough appointments or having enough meaningful conversations, or it's not going to good interviews, or it's not going to lead to closes, how do you know? Test everything. We cut our teeth, as I said earlier, on a recruiting website. And on that recruiting website, we would have banner ads, and we had 350,000 truck drivers a month coming to that website. And if you had your ad above the fold, that meant that 350,000 truck drivers saw your ad. I could tell you immediately whether or not a message worked or not. Real quickly, I'm going to tell a quick story that is just scary. We got a call from a lady. I'm not going to tell her name because she may still be in the industry. And she said, well, I want you to change the ad to this. Now, we lived and died with the response. Y'all know that, you're recruiting directors. We lived and died with the response of the advertisement. And as soon as she posted that ad, her response rate went down 80%. 80%. Well, we lived and died with the number of leads that our clients were getting. And so I called her, and I'm going to make up a new name here. Sally, your ad's not working. We knew within 4 hours the ad wasn't working. And you could almost hear some hesitation on the phone. And she said, well, leave it up. It's a good ad. It'll work. We left it up. Next morning I called. Sally, this ad is not working. We need to pull it down and put the old one back up. I could feel the sweat coming through the phone line. I said, Sally, what in the world is going on here? What's the problem? And she said, I have placed $5 million worth of ads in the little magazines. This ad. She got fired. The response rate fell in the magazines everywhere. All she had to do is test the message. And I'll tell you that marketing firms today don't want you to do that because it takes away the mystification of what they're doing. Marketing and marketing is scientific. A/B testing. You can hire creative, but make sure the creative is working. Make sure that you're testing that message. If you don't remember anything else from today, test the message.
And I'd also like to highlight the timeliness of what you just shared. I mean, you were able to see within 4 hours that something that had sustained a fairly high level had dropped off 80%. For those of you that are on the call, how frequently are you looking at response rates over time? Is it the same day? Is it a week? Is it multiple weeks or even a month? How quickly are you revisiting the message to see if it's resonating? Are you running more than one at a time? Is one getting a better response rate than another? That's great. If you've got that proof, then you know where to spend your time and energy. You need to get more of the message that is working out that door. But if you're not reflecting on that to be able to see what works, then you don't have an informed way to respond to what you're doing. So always be paying attention to the responsiveness of the information that you're putting out there. Is it ad copy that people are responding to? And you can go, yes, I've got this kind of a click-through rate since we're using a site to do our recruiting. Or is this thing getting absolutely no traction at all? No one is clicking on this. The beautiful thing about messages is, as Jay has pointed out, you're not married to them. You don't have to live with them. Change them. Your marketing company may not want you to change it.
Let me say the opposite side of that too, Craig. I mean, we research stuff all the time. Here's a book this book cost me $135 to go out and buy. So it's got some of the best direct mail letters ever in it. And sometimes you find something that works and you can run it for 20 plus years. So just because you don't change for the sake of change, only change when the response rate starts going down. Wall Street Journal, in this book, the Wall Street Journal has one letter they've been sending out for the last 20 years, and it's because it works. It continues to work. So always test everything. You will save a lot on your budget by doing this, a lot on your budget. And it's tricky out there right now because in the old days, it was direct mail, it was radio, it was TV, it was little magazines. Now it's, LinkedIn, Craigslist, it's everything, and different messages for different venues may be the right way to do it. So anyway, test the message.
And it's a great way to test it before you stick your neck out with potentially a large ad spend. So, I mean, if you want to see what message to run with, test them first. Then once you determine that, that's what you put your money behind.
Thank you, sir. Okay. So we talked about this earlier. This is one of the things that we use, and this is what companies that want to recruit employees and keep them should do. This is the drip system. We go into great detail on our 2-day workshop on this. 12 plus 2. Remember, I alluded to 12 letters, 4 holiday, 4 industry, 4 specific, and 2 letters that if you know their anniversary and their birth date, if you know something special about them, and then you follow up 4 times a year with phone calls or whatever you determine what your nurture campaign is. This is our annual campaign. Whatever your nurture campaign is, you follow up with 4 quick phone calls. And what you're trying to do is find that A+, the top of the cream of the crop drivers that you're looking for. And you will follow the system. That's why a contact management system is so critical to have in place and understand. That way, if you have a recruiter that leaves the company, the next recruiter just picks up the ball and runs with it because there it is inside the system. All the notes are in there. Everything's in there. Now, with truck drivers, a lot of them come and go from the industry. So this list is going to have to be constantly developed and maintained on this. We have in the trucking industry with what we're doing, we have about a 15% turnover rate of the people we reach out to each year. Some industries it's higher than that, and some industries it's lower than that. But with truck drivers, it's probably going to be a 30% turnover on your list every year in and year out, at least on that one. So I promise you this works. This is where I get the biggest number of pushback. Most people don't want to send out the letters. It's labor intensive. Each letter costs $1 to $1.25, and it is snail mail letters, as Craig said earlier. But they work because, I mean, think about this. When's the last time you got 12 or 13 letters from any of your vendors or anyone you deal with? They stand out. Nowadays, it's all about email, which most emails don't get open for 10 days. So, do something different. This is also where the video text comes in. Occasionally, just pick up the phone and do a video text. I sent a video text. We actually go into detail too about how do you do a video text. It's really simple. It really is simple. And we don't have enough time to go into it right now, but it is not rocket science to do a video text, but there is some technique to it. You want to make sure that you got a medium shot, that you're speaking from the heart, that you're sincere. And there are ways to get into a sincere zone before you send a video text to people. And it's also a really good way to communicate in general. But I'll tell you, if you want to test this right now, get your cell phone out as soon as this, not right now, but as soon as this is over, get your cell phone out and go to about a medium-sized shot. I'm holding my cell phone here. Go to about a medium-sized shot and send your wife, your spouse, your loved one, someone you love, a very sincere video text. Just send it to and say, hey, if it was my wife, I'd say, hey, Mary, I was sitting here at the office. I was thinking about you. Man, I really do love you. And I really think a lot. I just love you. Just wanted to send you a text. I promise you, you will be absolutely blown away by the results that you get. Now, obviously, don't do that to somebody that you're trying to recruit. So, all right. Craig, anything else on that one?
I would like to say in the drip system, this is valuable for people that you haven't talked to yet that are in your pipeline as a prospect. This is also valuable for people that have told you no, not right now. Just because someone tells you no in June does not mean in July or August or September, their circumstances might have changed. They might be looking for an opportunity. You want to make sure that you're still in front of them. I want to throw out an example for you. Many, many moons ago, we're talking 10 years ago, I walked on a Ford dealership lot in Overland Park, Kansas to look at a brand new Ford Escape. I did not buy that Ford Escape, but I had a great conversation with the sales gentleman on that lot. And I guarantee you, every year on my birthday or roundabout, he has called me on my cell phone to just remind me that if I ever need help at his dealership with a Ford, that he's my guy. Now, I'm not in the mood to buy a new vehicle right now, but if I'm going to buy a Ford, I am buying it from that guy because he has taken the time and the effort and energy to remain engaged with me when he didn't have to keep that connection alive. And that's the same kind of thing that you guys can engender with those folks that say no in this moment, but might not say no 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, a year from now. They may realize, you know what, that was a great opportunity. I really need to revisit that with them. And if you've already got something in front of them, then it's much easier for them to reconnect with you, and you get to bring them then on board with your team. It may have taken a little bit longer, but you've nurtured that relationship with the people that said no so that you turn them into yeses later on.
Good point. Good point. Okay. If you don't remember anything else, once again, a recruiter model day. What do you do with your hours? I'm just going to tell this story. We call it a broker model day around here. We had a salesman, and he generated $78,000 in his first year as a salesperson. And we then structured that person's day. Now, I will tell you, as a recruiting director, as a recruiter, you're going to get great pushback from this, but I'm telling you, this is gold. Structure your day. So we sat down with our salesperson and we said, okay, you have 8 hours in a day. How much time do you need to actually return emails and return phone calls? And so we broke out 15 minutes in the first hour and 15 minutes at noon and 15 minutes later, or whatever the numbers were. How many hours a day do you need to actually make presentations? How many hours a day do you need to make cold calls? How many hours a day do you? And so we broke it down and we had a model day. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail here, but I'm going to tell you that salesperson went from 78,000 in 1 year, working 8 hours a day. In the following year, on here we'll call it the recruiter model day, 278,000. Let that number sink in. Everybody wants to try to play the game. Here's the problem. You lose momentum. If all of a sudden I'm on the phone or I'm doing an email or I'm doing whatever and I get interrupted, I'm losing momentum. Now, I don't know if I believe the studies, but the studies show that you lose at least 15 minutes every time you lose momentum on what you're doing. Set up a model day and stick to it. I know, I know, no one wants to live like this, but I promise you, you will, and you won't be able to do it 100% of the time, but you can live with it 80% of the time. And living with it 80% of the time, you will see your numbers go up exponentially. I promise you they will go up exponentially. Spend some time and really think about the recruiter model day. We do this in our client service department as well. There are certain times when they need to return calls and return emails and things of that nature. So what do? We've structured it so that some people have to man the phones while others are doing the follow-up work they've promised they were going to do. So there are different ways to structure this, but I promise you, schedule your day. Know exactly what your people are doing day in and day out. You will improve their efficiency immensely. Immensely. That's a great word, immensely. So, Craig, any additions to that one? Because we're about
I
to
love
wrap it up here.
Sure, sure. No, I love this. I love this. I know some of you have to manage teams of recruiters, and it's very likely that if you've got more than two or three, they are all doing something different throughout their day. Some are more productive than others. So it's a great way to kind of harness all of them and have them marching in the same direction. If you knew exactly how your day was structured out today, that makes it easier for you to lock right in the work that you need to be doing. And remember, you're competing against recruiters out there who may not be doing this. They may be flying by the seat of their pants. They have no structure to their day. They can't remember what they're supposed to be doing next. This does give you just an organizational advantage, just like having technology would against the people that don't. So, because those are the folks that you are competing against for the attention of anybody who is expressing interest in your position. So, I think this is a great idea. This is going to look different for all of you on this call. That's one of the reasons that we're not committing to any specific structure. Everybody here has different needs based on their business and the schedules that you guys run. But take some time to think about this. How much time do you need to devote in your day to specific activities to move that needle, to increase the number of leads, to increase the number of meaningful conversations, increase the amount of interviews? I mean, if you increase the amount of interviews, that's going to change the amount of time you need to devote in a day to those things. And then obviously the upside will be more folks coming on board, less time and effort that you have to spend. And yeah, this I think is profound. So think about that. Spend some thinking time on that, folks.
Thank you, sir. Okay, the goal is obviously filling up the trucks, and we're getting close to running out of time. So let's jump to the next level. Um, Improve your recruiting program. We have a program, and if you're interested in this program, there are a couple of things we have a free offer as well. Next steps. We've scheduled 4 two-day recruiting workshops at our training facilities in the Dallas, Texas area, actually in Irving, Texas. And if you're interested in that, that program includes 12 monthly webinars on recruiting to keep up with what's going on in the marketplace and new developments. And there's also a 52-week recruiting a sales course that goes along with this. So what you're doing is you're embedding your employees and your recruiters in recruiting constantly, but it starts with a 4-day class, does the 12 monthly webinars on follow-up and 52-week recruiting a sales training program. Because I mean, we've delivered over 114 million training sessions, and we know what works and we know what doesn't work. And so this is how you ramp up your recruiting, because remember, it's going to get worse in the next 2.5 to 3 years. So we also have a free trial on our basic services. And then we also have a free recruiting ad on one of our websites. And so Craig, I'm going to let you take it from here, because I've kind of made our shameless pitch, for
Sure.
having people participate.
So we've launched some questions on the screen right now. We know that some of you don't know us very well and would like to know more about the platform. So we always make available a free demo of our system. It takes probably 20, 30 minutes of your time for us to walk through what we do and how we do it, but also answer questions that you have and things that you're trying to improve for your organization. He mentioned Better Truck Driving Jobs, our sister company. For everyone who is attending this webinar today, we're offering a free year of job postings on that site. So if you'd like details about that, respond to that question. And finally, if you'd like more information about the recruiting workshop that Jay has shared, feel free to answer yes to that question as well. And I will also go ahead and put Jay's contact information on the screen right now. That is his specific email. So if you have questions that you would like to ask him off air, you are certainly able to do so. I know that we did have one question that came in on the Q&A about what are ways for obtaining leads. So unfortunately, I don't have a name associated with that question, so I don't know who asked it to be able to get some follow-up done, because I know we are out of time today, but I do want to make sure that we get some answers, some ideas your way.
Let me give a real quick answer on that
Okay.
one, Craig, because this is the one thing that we did that really separated us and filled up our room, and that was we paid a $500 referral fee to our existing employees, because there's a theory out there that birds of a feather flock together. And so we paid a $500 referral fee to our existing employees, and we have hired about 11 people just off that system alone. Now, there's some rules to that, et cetera, but there's also a good cultural mix. If you can get friends to go to work for you, a lot of times people will stay with your company because they've got a friend there. So that's a totally different conversation. Didn't mean to jump in there, Craig, so I'm gonna let you wrap it up. Thank you,
That's
everybody,
okay.
for taking
That's
time out
okay.
of your schedule.
And Jay, thank you so much for sharing this with us today. And again, if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask Jay offline, that is his email address. So please reach out to him, and we will see you all again very soon. And we thank you so much, and be safe out there, everyone. We appreciate you.
Thank you all.